So I work for San Jose State University, and we are essentially kind of a small city of about 40,000 people. We have about 33,000 students, 5,000 faculty and staff. We host the San Jose Public Library, and we have a very diverse environment with hospitalities, classrooms, theater, sports arena, outdoor. So we have a pretty prolific 802.11 wireless deployment of about 3,000 access points. I guess during non-COVID times, it will see minimally 24,000 concurrent devices on a wireless network during the week, during the day, upwards of 30 sometimes. We'll even see as many as sometimes 50,000 different devices on the wireless network. And pretty much one of the themes that we have is, there's a lot of device diversity, and also there is a high density. And the high density is sometimes in places where you can predict, but not necessarily, which is where I think this is very important to keep in mind as kind of you look at other technologies, because 802.11 does present some limitations in how it can handle high density in some areas. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. So some of the challenges that we've been facing, and these I think are very common challenges with wireless, but pretty much wireless on campuses is really kind of like a utility. People just have the expectation it works like a light switch. So the expectation is just like home. You come in, it works. You shouldn't have to do anything different. The other thing that's also we're finding out more and more is wireless is a network. Our physical infrastructure is now more about things, less about people, and a lot more of the people are on the wireless network, and it has to be available 24/7. Our device diversity, we tend to see for a couple different reasons, whether it's for research projects or in the dorms, or even for campus operations. We see a lot of non-mainstream devices showing up on the network and need to be supported. Outdoor coverage on campus has also been kind of a little challenging, and for us especially because we don't have that big of a campus. We're in downtown. We're like an 8x6 block area. So one of the issues you have sometimes is that you can have a lot of bleed through between the external access points and the internal access points, which can cause, and also just a sheer number of access points that we need to put in the outdoors, which creates certainly the cost of deploying outdoors is much higher for us than deploying indoor. There's also more and more use cases for security and reliability of connections. We have security cameras that we have to support. We also have things such as door lock systems, and there's certain environmental systems that are monitored all need to be able to run over the network. And sometimes those are in places that we don't have traditional cabling, or they're outdoors, so we may need to leverage the wireless network to move sensitive data. The other thing I think that tends to happen, especially on campuses, is I call it elephant memory. It's just that, like, once people have a bad experience, they seem to just carry that experience through. So it's really important that when people first come to campus, whether it's vendors, faculty, staff, that we always have a positive experience on how they are their experience is. The other item is connectivity in out places. As much as we have pretty prolific coverage, we're still amazed at some of the areas that we tend to get requests for coverage in sometimes. And overall, the number of access points required, is kind of increasing for density. Now, this is all exacerbated with what I call the digital transformation, and it's really the proliferation of network devices of IoT that we're seeing. We just recently built a new gym, and it's just amazing the number of wireless devices that are supported on in that building. But it's really, if I look at digital transformation in regards to wireless, it's about enablement of technology. And I think right now, it's really about enabling the connectivity and different people to have different use cases on the wireless platform. Next slide, please. So as I'm going to kind of focus a little bit more, what I hope you get out of this is really, I'm kind of saying is, these are some of the challenges we have. And I think this creates some of the opportunity for CBRS, which we've been tracking for, I've personally been tracking this for about 2 years. I'm very excited at where we are with it today. But some of the issues we have is high density non-Wi-Fi 6 areas. Wi-Fi 6 certainly has taken care, for example, indoors, some of our high density areas, but that's in areas that we plan, and it takes a while to upgrade campus. Also, we do not have Wi-Fi 6 for the outdoors, which creates an issue. Seamless mobility and roaming. Getting 100% outdoor connectivity is certainly challenging in some areas where you're always going to find holes and areas where you need to augment, and this isn't expensive. So one of the things, for example, I see is I kind of look at connectivity that could work in a couple different ways depending on the use case, where devices should be able to go from 802.11 to our private LTE, and failing that, they can go to the carrier LTE. Although that's my least preferred route, because as soon as my users go on to the carrier LTE, I lose visibility and control of what the users are doing. Whereas so long I keep it either on 802.11 or CBRS, I still own the quality of service and the identity of the user, then the user experience, and keeping it local. And at some point, devices, I think, are going to be able to make decisions and roam between 802.11 or CBRS and have a unified experience. And I think this also alleviates some of the onboarding issues. For example, as we're tracking onboarding issues, generally what we see a lot of them as we're tracking it is that they're all in the outdoors area. They're folks who keep moving, not properly attaching, not completing, and it really kind of stems from the fact that I don't think the 802.11 is really designed well to work in the outdoor space as well as people are walking through. Always, as I kind of said, we have perception of confidence and expectations. The expectation is that we have connectivity everywhere with wireless. We need to be able to, whether it's like the one install a new parking meter, the one install a new light sensor, and a new camera. The expectation is that network is always there. And also we've been kind of getting some interesting requests for connectivity in odd places and outdoors. Hey, we want to have a movie night in this outdoor space. We want to be able to do that, or we want to run a dance class and we want to be able to stream this from this location, and certainly for sporting events. I think I already covered the outdoor coverage. And the other thing that I want to kind of elaborate, it's kind of exciting, is that the cost of outdoor deployment for Wi-Fi is certainly much more expensive for us, because not so much because of the cost of the equipment. There's a little bit of that as well, because the outdoor equipment is more expensive, but it's generally the installation of getting it there, getting it mounted, is certainly a much higher cost. So having technology that can provide that with a lot less radios certainly is extremely attractive financially. Let's go to the next slide, please. I'm kind of looking at this, like I said, I'm kind of looking at this as where 802.11, private CBRS, private LTE, and 5G kind of all work together. So as we're kind of we're looking for a comprehensive outdoor coverage that we're able to deploy, and this is somewhat about people as well, but also our ability to move campus operations to new platforms, getting away from the legacy devices, being able to bring sensors and things that previously we couldn't get connectivity onto the network securely, and really kind of creating a connected campus. Security for IoT, we have our public safety department, so we have our own police department. And for them, for example, I think it would be fantastic to have a much better connectivity to be able to connect to the network, to security cameras, but essentially not have a much different experience in a car or a command center than they do sitting, for example, in the office. We're looking at things such as, physical security for cameras, monitoring of water well, HVAC, power management. These are all things that, as we're installing new systems, they're all now network devices. They're all network systems that we try to bring up. And sometimes, for example, the power management and the HVAC, sometimes those devices are on the roof or places that, even though the building has connectivity, we don't generally have connectivity where this equipment is placed. And like I said, the seamless roaming between 802.11 and CBRS, I think it's going to be very, very, very important as more and more devices that are coming out, the iPhones and the Samsung phones, for example, they will be able to support both, and they should be able to make intelligent roaming. And as we have global onboarding to some extent, it should be a seamless experience, meaning that as you're on a device, as soon as it makes a decision that, hey, I'm better off using right now CBRS, or I'm better off using Wi-Fi 6, the device should be able to make the seamless roaming. And the fact that you're going to a whole different band is going to be no different than a client going from one AP to the other. This is kind of how we're looking at that. And I think the glue that's going to make this work together is global onboarding, for different IDPs, identity providers. So in education, we have EduRoam, for example. So I'm hoping that, for example, we have ability to onboard EduRoam. There's talks about a whole new concept of open roaming, where for example, you can choose to set your identity with any identity provider you have. Maybe it's your Apple ID, maybe it's your Samsung ID, maybe it's your Apple ID, or it could be a social ID. But it's sort of kind of going into this whole big notion that the identity and the onboarding becomes a lot easier, because I don't need portals. I just need to know, oh, you're going to onboard here and you're boarding with your Samsung phone using your Samsung ID. I have the identity I need. I can go ahead and let you onto the network. And at some point, I see this working in so well that we may be able to even reduce the need that we have for the typical DAO systems that people are installing on campus, because a lot of what their phones are doing today, it is using network. And then lastly here, I think we have an interesting approach here also with a build setup ad hoc network for special events. A lot of times, for example, we may have a concert where there's a big line, and we want to provide both wireless connectivity with more density, maybe provide security cameras. So I'm kind of looking that we could potentially use some of the cradle point transceivers, I'm going to call them. They're essentially going to go from CBRS to give me Ethernet. And at that point, I can pretty much, so long as I have power, I can bring up network and bring up whatever services I deem necessary on temporary basis. And in so much that it could almost be transparent, that you don't even necessarily need to bring a network team or all that. You can essentially set some podiums, and this could be a plug and play. I see a lot of this happening in the South Campus. We have a lot of different fields, and they do a lot of different activities with different requirements. So for me, the ability to set up ad hoc networks which are reliable, where you don't have to worry about the quality of connectivity, is just phenomenal. It's something that generally I don't have that luxury with 802.11. Next slide, please. And then, as always, we kind of look at pandemic use cases right now, which are very, very timely. So I've had, for example, requests because they're trying to figure out some classes, for example, you can't really teach remote. So some thoughts, for example, have been, I'm just throwing an example, is how do you teach a class in outdoor spaces? Like, so some of the thoughts, well, if you're going to do a dance class or something like that, we don't want to do it indoor. Let's talk about some of our outdoor spaces. And for example, top a parking garage where for public safety reasons, we generally didn't want to provide wireless connectivity in the garage because we don't want people to hang out there. But this is an example where we can ad hoc, bring it up for a class or a meeting or whatever activity up there, and we can do that. And even at the outdoor, for example, sometimes they still want to be able to do Zoom connectivity to teach a hybrid, or if I need device density. So I think there's a lot of these kind of possibilities where before we may have had to deal with solutions in outdoors, would have to go ahead and run fiber because of the distances in outdoors, and then bring power and then put some transceivers. Now we can make this, I think, much easier to support ad hoc activities and the rapid change. I mean, and one thing that we learned from the pandemic here is like we've had to change how we do things very, very quickly with very little noise. And our traditional ways of doing things sometimes it's just not fast enough. So we need more agility. And this is just an example of how CBRS can add a lot of agility to what we do on the campuses.